Without further ado, let's open the next chapter called Decentralized Finance and NFTs, New Business Models in Traditional Markets. And with me, I have someone who's an advisor to all sorts of financial institutions in Germany. Please welcome Timo Bernau from GSK Stockmann. He will give a presentation on DeFi and real-world assets, how tokenization, DAOs, and NFTs can close the gap. The stage is yours, Timo.
Thank you. So, if DeFi is not complicated enough, we're trying to bring it together today with the real-world assets. So, I try to look a little bit in the future to see how DAOs with the real-world assets could be connected. So, happy to be here and bring this topic on the agenda. So, the truth about DeFi, right? I think in April we had the discussion here, is DeFi really decentralized at all? And I think many said, well, in most cases it is not. We have someone who's behind it, agencies or distributors. So DeFi is not really DeFi. However, time has stepped forward, and I think we've seen some protocols today which are, well, more or less decentralized. So, and we would need the regulator's view to judge about it. But especially in the open source protocols, we see real DeFi solutions, especially in lending and staking. So I'm very curious to see what the future will bring for DeFi in the real world assets. So, okay. As you can see here, just as a, very simplified comparison, on the left side, you see that in the real world, so in the off-chain world, if you have an investment platform, you have many regulated players. Yeah, the investment company, usually the investment vehicle itself is regulated. You have the exchange, which is also regulated, and you may have a custody provider, which is usually also regulated. So on the right side, you see, let's say, the best example of a perfect decentralized investing platform. And here you can see there's actually no one being regulated, and everything is decentralized, yeah, just covered by different smart contracts and protocols. So the interesting question, of course, is how could this work with real-world assets? Yeah, because most DeFi solutions we've seen so far are actually in the native digital values. So if you talk about cryptocurrencies or maybe even digital art or movies or songs, so these are assets which could per se be digitalized. So it's easier to bring them on chain. That's, of course, a little bit more difficult with other assets in the real world, like valuables. We have a panel discussion later on this, how this could work. We have a big real estate industry or real paintings or horses or whatever. So the question here is, how can we bring these real world assets on chain, and that's on a decentralized manner. So the keyword would be tokenization. Yeah? That's a report by BCG, so Boston Consulting Group, and I think it was September published, and they see a big potential for tokenization of illiquid assets, so meaning also private equity, homes, etc. So why would you actually go into this business at all? So why wouldn't you leave it like it is? We have investment funds, we have portfolio managers. So the basic question is, why would you do it? It's quite easy. It brings a lot of advantages, like you've just brought an investor base, because many people, they cannot afford to invest in private equity or to invest in, let's say, large buildings or you would have a huge KYC process, or you're not even bankable because probably you are from a country where you do not have access to all these business solutions. So it's also wider geographical reach. You have fast transaction times. I mean, everybody who has bought a house or a flat would say it's probably not the easiest thing to do. You need to go to notary, you need to be put in the land register, etc., etc. And if you put it on chain, you have a better infrastructure, meaning that once it is on chain, you can already use the different layers which are on chain too. So probably you can have better asset management, better asset liability management, because you have different sources of data. Yeah? And once it is tokenized, you could probably also use it as a collateral. Yeah? You can use your fraction of real estate to get a loan, for example, in a more easier way as it is today. So having said this, I was trying to picture how a decentralized tokenization could work. Of course, you need someone holding the property. For example, if you talk about a house, you need an owner, or a watch, you need an owner. That could be an SPV, could also be the DAO directly. And you would need someone who's doing the tokenization, so actually bringing the shares of the SPV or any other assets on chain. And you might want to be sure that the SPV is actually holding this kind of asset. For some assets, it may be easier. For example, in the land register, you can go there and check who is in the register. For other assets, that's probably more complicated. So you want to have a verification of ownership, and maybe a non-fungible token would be a good way to do it. But how would the DAO be in the position to invest in these assets if they wouldn't set it up themselves? They would need a trading platform. I mean, there are trading platforms already, so you would need an ecosystem where you could buy tokenized real-world assets. Yeah, so that's let's say the basic construct. Of course, you have different problems as well. For example, if you would invest in a real estate, the people living there would, at least today, probably not pay their rent with Bitcoin or Ether, but with fiat money. So you need a transfer in currency. You would probably need a valuation or verification process, so just on the time scale if something happens with the assets. So how would we face these? And I tried to have two different angles of evaluating this. One is just the legal perspective, the civil law or corporate law perspective. The other one, which is also very interesting, of course, the regulatory perspective. So here comes the civil law perspective. And here we first face the problem that some assets could be tokenized, but what does it mean? Yeah? We have an investment token representing whatever, a clock or a car or whatever. The main problem is that, at least from the German law perspective, an investment token is nothing you can own like a clock. It has, let's say, no real ownership in this regard. And it doesn't implement ownership of the assets you want to tokenize. So the ownership doesn't really goes along with the transfer of the ownership of the watch, for example, because you need to adhere to the civil law. And you could actually try to find ways around it. For example, you would say, okay, whoever is in the position of the token should also be in the position of the ownership of what we see on the right side. However, the main problem is there's no ownership in good faith. So, for example, if here on the left side, you have the investors. They originally bought the token, and there's a legal agreement behind it that says, okay, whoever will buy the token, I'm, as the original owner of the watch, I'm willing to possess it, like not on a ownership, just like to possess it, like to hold it somewhere, for the next person buying the token. However, if I turn around and buy the watch to someone else and he buys it, there's no ownership. So the transfer of ownership in Germany is not totally secure on a 100% basis, even if you find ways to work around. And that's, let's say, the situation with, let's say, small goods or something you can put in a trésor. But with the building, it's of course more difficult because you can only transfer the ownership if you go to the notary. That's the legal act you need to do to transfer ownership of a real estate. And that's the same with some company shares. Yeah? You can only transfer them if you actually go to the notary, and it will be changed. Yeah? So here we face the problem that you cannot directly change ownership of some of the goods you want to represent with a token. And here comes the idea of the NFT. Just as an example, you would need a third party who would take care of verification of the ownership. So I think there are already solutions in place. You can go there and put in like a collector's card or valuables. They would put it in Trezor, and they would issue an NFT with all the details you need. So you've got at least a verification. And as long as no one with the position of the NFT would come to this third party and say, okay, I want to get it out, it will remain in the Trezor, and you can be sure that no one else would actually possess this goods. However, of course, you need a third party which is trustable. Yeah? So you need to find a way how you can trust third parties. And I think there are even some interesting developments with regard to real estate. So if you have, let's say, an electronic register where everybody would trust in, and you would have just the shares of the company being reflected by token, it really doesn't matter who's registered in the actual land registers, as long as we don't have any digital land registered, and I think that will take some time, and probably not even on the blockchain. You would need here a second layer where you would have a trust that this works with the NFTs. So that's an idea. And we still have to solve the problems with the DAOs. Yeah? DAO is a legal problem in Germany per se. So you cannot really implement any legal form you would like as a DAO, because you've got the corporate structure, which prevents most companies being a DAO, meaning represented by all owners. So there's no, let's say, central management. You could have a civil law partnership or association. That's possible. The problem is, if you do it, you have the full liability of all the members. Yeah, so, and that's something most people don't want. Yeah, they don't want to engage in a German DAO and then be fully liable for what the DAO does. So here, people work with also a liability wrapper under the DAO, which will actually then engage in the businesses the DAO is actually doing. Yeah? If this is really successful in the end, remains to be seen, as long as there are no judgments about it. But that's the way people do it today. Still, there are further questions which remain to be answered. For example, is there T&C law, so the AGB-Recht in the German law, applicable to DAO? I mean, depending on if there's someone developing it. And what's the place of jurisdiction? Usually it is where the central administration is, and there's no central administration. So maybe where it is founded, but where is it founded? Yeah, so probably that could be what kind of company you would be doing. So if you would, for example, choose Wyoming DAO, yeah, you would be in Wyoming. Yeah, but if you would use a German company, then probably your seat of foundation is Germany, but that's also unsecure. Taxation is also a question which is not being solved for DAOs so far. So many questions, and you need also oracles for verification pricing. Just to give you one example, you buy a house, and you have got a verification, and you've got a pricing, etc., and the house is so valuable because it has a super view on the River Rhine, for example. But then someone builds a huge skyscraper just in front of the building. How do you actually know what influence this has on the pricing? Yeah, so you need actually, like as you do it with the funds business, someone who's taking care of all the assets and asset management services which are in your DAO. So that's something which still needs to be considered. Of course, if you've got a watch which is in the treasury, it's easier. But if you've got assets which really need asset management, it's more difficult. So regulatory, I think I only have a couple of minutes left. Regulatory view, different to what I said in April, it has changed. So if you're outside the European Union, meaning no seat or no direct targeting of people in the European Union, the European regulators wouldn't care about you. So that's why we see a lot of DAOs working outside of Europe so far. What will come with the MiCA? MiCA basically says if you're really fully decentralized, you should be out of scope of MiCA. And if you've no issuer, for example, of any cryptocurrency, will also be out. But, and that's a big but, if you would engage in other crypto asset services which relate to those assets, yeah, for example, if you would do brokerage for Bitcoin, the Bitcoin itself is not regulated, but the brokerage of Bitcoin would be a crypto asset service, right? NFT, so the use case I've made up here, if you really represent a unique, valuable, you would probably be outside. If it is a large collection, or if you would fractionalize your real estate, you are probably within the MiCA regulation. Further development remains to be seen. ESMA is asked to do a Q&A and further guidelines on this. And I think I can skip this. So my basic question was, okay, if we solve all these problems, can we do a DAO under regulatory view of MiCA, or what would BaFin say about it? And at least in the past, we have seen in some other regulations like the AFMD or in the German Banking Act, we have notes by BaFin and ESMA saying, okay, if really the day-to-day control is with the investors, so they really decide about every investment or de-investment, and they choose who will be the administrative body, etc., then it should be out of scope. Yeah, so let's see if this comes true also for DAOs in the MiCA space. Still, even if we get the DAO out of the regulation, we still need to consider if the broker, the tokenization custody will be subject to regulation. Conclusion, development in DeFi per se, but also in real-world assets is just at the beginning. Technical, we see new solutions. Legally, very, very many open questions. Investment DAO may be possible without regulation, but we definitely need civil law rules on tokenization, so we can transfer with the investment token the legal ownership of the assets. We need a legal framework for DAOs. And if this comes true, I think DeFi for real-world assets is possible. Of course, it's much more complex. And for certain assets, we would need our Oracle solutions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.